First, I'd like to say thank you to Northwest Indian College for inviting me to this symposium. It's an honor to be here, and an honor to be a part of a discussion of Vine Deloria. Like all of us, respect him as an intellectual titan. So I'd like to say thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you, Dr. Wilkins, for his encouragement to come as well. I'm a student at the University of Minnesota, so I found my way here from Minneapolis. So it's been a nice travel. I'd also like to say thank you to all the water protectors. This keynote address this morning was very fun. Yeah. I think like most of us, it was a powerful thing to witness and an awakening thing for people across this country and across the globe. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to say thank you and express my gratitude for all of those efforts. They've trickled into all sorts of different parts of life and ways of thinking. My name is Dan Mcniel. I've come from central Wisconsin, and I'll tell you a little bit about where I come from and how I got to here. I was raised in a town called Neenah, Wisconsin. My parents, like most Caucasians, so I'm a melding pot of backgrounds without any close cultural affiliation to any of them. German, Polish, French, Scottish, English. And my family had immigrated here throughout different generations. First arriving around the mid-1700s, and then my maternal grandparents, both of their grandparents, immigrated here in about the 1900s. Settled in Milwaukee, and I came to appreciate nature and really kind of fall in love with this idea of rights of nature out of a family cabin that my parents bought when I was a 3-year-old. It was just a piece of land, and we've come to cultivate it and grow with it, and it's by a small lake in central Wisconsin called Lake Lucerne. About 60 feet deep, 1.5 miles round, completely undeveloped. There's a church camp that surrounds the whole land with 2 little cabins there. And it was a wonderful place to grow up and really has shaped me in my path since then. And it was hard to leave that, but I went to the University of Minnesota as a freshman and sat in school and really just thought, I don't have enough experiences to know what I want to do or want to be. And I think that's a common experience that college students have today, is how can I pick a job? So after freshman year, I decided that I was going to take some time and get experiences. And my parents had a very good friend who was a Jesuit priest, and he had passed away by this time, but he worked at our school in Pine Ridge called the Red Cloud Indian School. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but I chose to go there and volunteer, and I've sung its praises ever since. That was in 2008. And Red Cloud's a very special place, and Pine Ridge is a very special place. It doesn't not easily fit into a box of descriptions. It's a lot of things. But I got to spend a couple of years there, and I was 19 and 20, and it was very formative for me. Growing up, my parents had instilled just these basic principles on it. Be a good person, treat everyone the way you want to be treated, and you know, it wasn't quite pronounced this way, but be a good relative. At Red Cloud, though, I was able to hear Matakio Yas on a daily basis, and this idea that the students there are connected and related to the earth. And it's a beautiful sentiment that I think can be applied universally, that we all can come to recognize this important interconnectedness that we share, not only amongst humans, but extending to all parts of the natural world, which is an important thing to grow. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to about this struggle to make that jump from humans' interconnectedness to the natural world's interconnectedness. So I spent a lot of time at Red Cloud, and I drove a school bus as a 5th grade teacher's aide, coached the football team, coached the track and field team, had to help with the sweat lodge. It was a beautiful place that's doing wonderful things. They have consistently some of the most Bill and Melinda Gates scholarships for seniors in high school to go on and get a full ride college degree. They have a K through 12 Lakota curriculum there, and about 700 students will go through the program and learn the language. And it's all done through private donations, and about $50 a student to go and receive a really impressive education that can prepare them to be a better citizen and a better community member. So I took that, and I spent a lot of time afterwards kind of with this understanding that cultural values they're not just handed down. You know, they're malleable things that we can accept and that we recognize, and they're culturally defined. But when you have an intercultural experience, you can come to recognize that things are viewed and valued differently, and that without any intercultural experience, you don't have the ability to just see things that way. But it's with this rights of nature, it's an important thing to understand that there's different ways to value something, to look at it, and to appreciate it. I spent a lot of time trying to understand that. And just recently, with studying under Dr. Wilkins last September, he had introduced me to this idea that the Ho-Chunk Nation was adopting the rights of nature and considering amending their constitution to include it as the first of 567 federally recognized tribes. And I had never heard of this concept, and I've studied it since and gotten to know it and come to really believe in it as an important way to kind of change this mindset between how we view the land as a commodity or as a community. So with that, I'll share a quote, because I think this is something that we've worked on for the last century, last decade. This is a growing understanding, but Aldo Leopold wrote Sand County Almanac in 1966, wrote, "We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see the land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." And that was pulled from the chapter on the natural universe in Wilkins and Deloria's Legal Universe. So it's an important distinction to understand and a topic to continue to talk about and express with as many people as possible, because there is this view of nature as a natural resource, as a commodity, as something to be used and exploited, and corporations have such a strong established ability to express themselves within the law in our country in a way that other groups have fought mightily to achieve. In 1819, John Marshall's Supreme Court declared the Supreme Court an inanimate object existing solely in the eyes of the law withstanding. But it would take even longer for African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, women and children to get that same status. And if you don't even consider Citizens United and the idea of corporations having free speech and the powerful lobbying abilities of corporations, or the fact that some corporations have wealth the size of small countries' GDPs, if you drop all that and just think that in 1819, corporations were granted personhood status before all of these other groups that have had to fight for that, I think that really does help us understand the origins of this structure and this system that empowers this way of thinking, that this paradigm shift that the rights of nature is advancing is really trying to focus on. So it's a mindset, and we've heard that before. I think that this rights of nature needs to be a preemptive effort. It can't be a reactionary. It can't help fix something once a corporation has come in and identified your community, your environment as its next feeding grounds. I mean, it has to be done ahead of time and recognize the value that the community has. And it can only be adopted within a community bill of rights, within a tribal constitution, through the recognition of those people in that community coming together and acknowledging that they believe in this. So it has to come from within. And I think Standing Rock and the powerful language that came out and the powerful images that came out are really awakening people to this kind of discussion. And I had watched and felt an affinity for Native issues for a long time, but it seems like there is a youth movement and an indigenous rising movement that's coming out of Standing Rock to take up and take a leadership role, to speak out and to express their worldviews in a way that is needed and necessary, but didn't exist in the same way 2 years ago that exists today. And that's a really beautiful thing. And something that needs to continue to be spurred on and held on to and encouraged and nurtured and valued. Another interesting idea, and this is one that I would like to ask more questions about to others, but I think it's important to recognize. We heard this morning in the keynote speaker talk about this idea that our Constitution advanced individual rights, and the legal universe talks about this idea too, the social contract, private property, But there's also this very embedded idea within our thinking and our political systems, our legal systems, of this idea of trust, of public trust lands. We highly prize our national parks and have built them into our ways and our cultural heritage for a long time now. And all of those lands are considered to be belonging to future generations. And that's a term that I've really appreciated and come to enjoy, is this idea of future generations and passing it on. Because these national parks, this area, I think that there is, to some degree, a willingness to appreciate and come to nature and come to these ways, but not at the expense of my own personal well-being or our economic well-being. And that comes out of the way that we measure things. Vine, I will read you a quote too, it was very astute in metaphysics of modern existence, and acknowledged kind of a root of our problem is that we judge the vitality of our societies not by the number of wise and compassionate people we produce, but by our gross national product and a constantly expanding economy. That's how we think of things. But today we've heard a different perspective, that wealth is about knowing where you come from. That wealth is about being a good relative. And there are different ways to value the same thing, and it comes through intercultural understanding that we can grow this mindset. And so that has been something I've continued to think on and grow. And a couple of figures that have helped me along that way, Vine himself is a major one, and all of his writings guide you toward those ways. But on page 3, in the introduction of Metaphysics of the Modern Existence, he introduces the reader to a couple of like-minded non-Indians. Christopher Stone, who developed this idea of the rights of nature, and Gary Snyder, who is a poet and a thinker and a man that grew close to the earth in important ways and has been instrumental in my experiences of having that mindset switch in which I can recognize that I am a part of a natural community. I don't own the land, I belong to the land. And Gary Snyder, if you haven't heard of him, I really encourage you to find some of his works, find some of his poems, and learn more about Gary Snyder, because I really admire the ways that he thinks. And him and Christopher Stone are really playing an important role in a true ecological movement. It's not thinking about nature in the ways that humans use nature. It's about recognizing that nature itself has basic rights. Just in the last 50 years as a society, we've kind of come to recognize that a healthy environment is a basic human right. And we've developed the EPA and all of these protections to kind of guide us towards preserving that for us and for future generations. But the paradigm shift is going to come when we can recognize that a healthy environment has its own basic rights. And it's not a human ability to enjoy the natural environment, but the natural environment itself has those rights. And I think we're still struggling to turn that paradigm, but it's happening slowly, and as Mari Margula told us, it's a multi-generational effort. It takes time and it takes community coming together. Also, in studying this, I came to the work of Mr. Steve Pavlik, who seems to be an influential person in creating this symposium and here at the Northwest Indian College. And at the third Vine Delorious Symposium, he had presented a modest proposal and talked about these ideas. I'll read you some of his words. Before I do, though, I was talking to a staff member here at the Northwest Indian College, John, and he told me that Mr. Pavlik was a big Packer fan. So, being so close to Seattle, I would like to say go Pack Go on behalf of me, Mr. Pavlik. So, this is what he spoke. For those tribes that truly see themselves as sovereign nations and wish to move beyond the rhetoric to actuality, and who really believe in traditional values as a means to distinguish their uniqueness apart from the American mainstream, I offer the following modest proposal: that they should call together constitutional conventions or some other more traditional means of assembly, enlist the aid of tribal members and spiritual leaders, and dramatically rewrite or amend their constitutions to reflect traditional values, including the recognition of the rights of the natural world and all its living and non-living entities. It was a long time ago, but it's come a long way, and yet there still is just one tribe out of 567 that's about to achieve this, and still has the full vote of its tribal membership to make that action. And if that goes through, I think it will play an instrumental role in shaping the future of what can happen and how tribes can play a leadership role in the next steps. So with those ideas, I would like to just kind of offer a few closing ideas as well. My mom had taught me this idea, and we talked about it a little bit this morning on the importance of the divestment campaign that came out of Standing Rock. Vote with your dollar. So my mom told me. She would do this by going to farmers markets and buying things from local artists. And voting with your dollar is a powerful way to make a difference. That has really shown itself to be true in the movement at Standing Rock and the divestment campaign that's come out of that. I'd also like to say that in preparing for this event, I had a lot of humility, and I'm just a young college student with a few experiences and a lot of ambition and hope and dreams, but that I think, speaking for all of us up here, that Vine would say that all of us have an important contribution to make, and our experiences offer important insights, and that it isn't left to the experts, it's left to each and every one of us to come together. And no matter where we come from, we have an important part to play in that effort. And lastly, I'd just encourage us all to continue to educate ourselves on the rights of nature, on the struggles that different groups are facing today. Those struggles have a lot of parallels and similarities, and understanding those things in an intercultural understanding effort is a crucial next step in achieving a maturity within ourselves and within our societies. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I'd love to talk to you more.